Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. Glad to have you with us. Today I'm going to make German noodles, which are properly pronounced Spaetzle, but I'm going to call it Spaetzle because that's what we've always called it. Here's the recipe. Thanks to Francine Furia Hogan's mother-in-law for her Spaetzle recipe. You can pause and write down the ingredients, and then let's get cooking. Now this is going to be really quick and easy, and when you're done it's going to seem so fancy. I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm grating in just a tiny little bit of fresh nutmeg. Not everybody puts nutmeg in it. The original recipe didn't have nutmeg, but I generally do, so I'm going to just add this little bit. And then I'm going to sift this flour into a bowl. And I need to add some salt, a teaspoonful of salt. Now there are several different recipes for this. They're all pretty similar. One of the reasons I decided to make it was we had a debate in our Cooking from Scratch on Debbie's Back Porch group about water or milk. And I had always used water. But so many people said milk was better that I thought I would make it and try the milk. So I'm getting this all sifted out, and then I'm going to make a well in the middle. Now all that's in here now is the flour, the salt, and that tiny little bit of nutmeg, which is optional. And I have 2 beaten eggs. That's another variation. Some people put 3. I think 2 is better. We'll go with 2 today. And we're just going to mix this in. Now, I'm going to tell you what you see flashing over on the side is a 4-year-old who insists that it's her turn. And, I try to keep her interested in the cooking. So we're going to let her do just a little bit of the stirring after I sent her to wash her hands. And she wanted to be in the camera, but I wouldn't let her. So it's my turn again. I'm going to finish this up. And I'm going to add the milk. Now, you can do this with a mixer. You can do it with a whisk. All I'm going to do at this point is mix it until I get any lumps out and everything's incorporated together. It's pretty easy. This is one of those things where I think it's more trouble to clean the mixer afterwards than it is to just do it by hand. So, mix, mix, mix. And the 4-year-old is explaining to me how I'm doing it wrong. So, I think I can get it though. Be right back. And this is what we're going for. We want a batter that's about the consistency of cake batter with no lumps. You don't want it to be too thin because when we make our Spaetzle, we will put it through the holes in a colander or through a Spaetzle maker if that's what you have. So you don't want it too thin. So before I started mixing, I put a big pot of water on, and I'm adding about a tablespoonful of salt, because a lot of pasta's flavor comes from the salt. If you don't salt your water, then you just have tasteless bread. So I have my colander, and if I did this very often, I would buy a Spaetzle maker. You can get them anywhere from $10 to $20, just depending on what you get. I found what looked like a pretty good one for $10. I may get it, but I don't do this often. Anyway, you want your colander to be wet. And I'm stirring my batter over here because it pretty quickly starts forming a skim, so you want to keep it beat up. And basically what we're doing is waiting for our water to get a good rolling boil. Because if it's not boiling, you don't get Spaetzle, you get mush. So you'll see why we want a little thickness on that batter. You don't want it to just pour right through. So I'm going to put a good bit in here. And if you have a Spaetzle maker, it has a little box that you pour it in, and then you move it back and forth along a grate. But I'm just pushing it through. And I'm wishing that I had gotten a better tool for this, but right now I'm just pushing it through with the ladle. And I'll show you it's coming out in kind of long, thin drips. And that's going to form into a nice thin, tiny little noodles, little pastas. And you need to work fairly quickly, and I got a better tool here to push these through. Now, this amount of batter is going to make 2 batches in my pot, and you want to break it up because they only cook 4 or 5 minutes, if that long, if your water's good and hot. So you only want to be dropping the batter in for about somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute, and then you need to stop and let those cook. So it works out to 2 batches for me. I'm going to let these boil. The recipe says 5 minutes. It may not take quite that long. Once they start getting set, you want to stir them to separate them because you don't want them just to cook into a lump. So I'll be back in about 4 minutes. Most recipes are going to tell you they're done when they all float. I actually think they need to cook 4 or 5 minutes. When you've done it a couple times, you'll see which way you like it best. But these are not going to overcook in 4 to 5 minutes. These look about right. I'm going to take them up, and I'm taking them up into a bowl. When I get all these taken up, before I start my second batch, I'm going to just shock these with some cold water. Now, I'm not going to rinse them, but I am going to shock them with cold water and then pour it off to make the cooking process stop. Now, this next step you don't have to do. You can serve them just as they are. But I have melted some butter in this pan, and yes, I've melted a lot of butter. You can use less. This is a whole stick. And I let it heat until it just got good and bubbly. And now I'm going to not really brown them. We'll get just a little bit of gold on them. But the Spaetzle is still very soft, and I put it in the butter, in hot butter, and it's going to soak up that flavor. Now, if you were using these in a cheese dish and you were going to bake them in the oven, and I'll show you how to do that someday, you probably wouldn't do this step, but I'm going to serve these with a braised pot roast and some gravy, and I want them to stand up to that gravy. So I'm just going to brown these a little bit, and then I'm going to plate them up. I'm going to top this with some of my tender, moist, braised pot roast and brown gravy, which I actually have another video of. I will show you later. And this gravy is wonderful. I've got lots of videos for gravy, but we're just going to put that right there. And ooh, see all that steam? This is so good. And I served it with some sweet and sour German cabbage, which was wonderful. I will have a video on that also. In the meantime, make some Spaetzle. You'll like it. You can use it like you would any kind of pasta, or you can use it like you would rice or even potatoes, and your family's going to love it. And you know, you should take every opportunity you can to show off. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. Hope to see you again tomorrow.